Hi, today we're going to continue on our topic of abuse, but today we're going to be talking about one that is a little more difficult to discuss. Not that the other ones weren't, but this one is more of a taboo topic, especially in good or normal society, and that's sexual abuse. And I know that some of you may not want to hear about this or listen to this any further. And I understand. I didn't really want to video it. I was supposed to put this out on Monday, but I'm putting it out today because it's taken me a while to not only write it, but film it. It's a hard topic for anyone. And I personally have experience in it. I began to be sexually abused when I was 6, and now I have healed from it. As a matter of fact, this is actually one form of abuse that I've experienced that I rarely think about or have any issues in anymore, which is a miracle in and of itself. It doesn't mean that I don't still have things that are connected to it, and I have not been, I don't continue to be affected in some ways. I'm not assuming that that's the case, but I do want you to know that it's not in the forefront of my mind. I do get to use it to help other people heal. So, even though that's the case and it's not something that I spend a lot of time thinking about anymore, I do promise to be as vulnerable and honest as I possibly can be. In many ways, obviously this topic is very taboo, but to kind of put it in perspective, 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 53 boys have experienced sexual abuse. That's a pretty devastating number. And now, of course, that is the United States only. Worldwide, the numbers are closer together because of cultural differences and I'm assuming cultural differences, and possibly it's not really seen the same way as it is here. There have been 1.3 million images of different children shown in child pornography. Not to mention the horrible epidemic of human trafficking, of which 1 out of every 4 victims are children. So I'm going to start with what sexual abuse of a child is. It is any physical, visual, or verbal interaction with a minor by an older child or adult whose purpose is sexual stimulation or satisfaction. Victims are boys and girls under the age of 18 who have suffered one or many experiences of a type of sexual abuse. It is almost always committed by someone. Okay, this is hard. It's almost always, not always, but almost always committed by someone the child knows or with whom the child has frequent contact, such as a family member, neighbor, a family friend, coach, babysitter, church leader, teacher, older friend, doctor, playmate's older sibling, institutional worker, daycare worker, live-in boyfriend or girlfriend. You get the point. Being in a position of familiarity with the kid, with the child, can set the stage of putting the child in a more vulnerable situation. I know that's hard because I'm not trying to instill anxiety here. I'm really just attempting to give you the facts of the situation, because even though it's scary, doesn't mean we should keep it to ourselves. We do need to know the truth, because the truth is what sets us free. Other aspects of sexual abuse are incest, molestation, and rape. Also, sexual abuse can be indirect or direct. And I'll give you some examples of the indirect. The direct, I think we've already covered, but the indirect is things more like voyeurism or exhibitionism, pornography, child pornography, and psychological abuse. And what I mean by psychological abuse is it's being teased about private parts, subjected to sexual name calling, or made to feel like a sex object. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So in my history and my understanding of indirect sexual abuse, where I see it a lot is in schools. How children talk to each other, how bullies treat each other, or how bullies treat other children, and I don't want to assume that it's only boys to girls, but in this day and age, it's not quite like that anymore. But I do still see a lot of things where there is a lot of talk about body parts and touching without permission and saying things about each other, and it's terrible on a child's psyche. We may think that it's harmless, especially since we see it in the media and in movies and things like that, and we think it's no big deal. But as an adult, I'd like you to think about, when you were a child or when you were younger, what it was like for you if someone catcalled, as they used to call it, or said certain things to you that way, and how that made you feel. Well, just because it's more predominant now does not take away the effects of it. So here we will begin to talk about how I was personally affected by sexual abuse. And ultimately, we will go on to talk about I'll make sure to include how all the ways that people are affected by it and signs to look for, and how to look for signs in abusers. And then ultimately we will talk about the healing of it and how there can be healing from it, because this is a very intense one. As a child, like I said, at the age of 6, I was sexually abused by a family member, which would also be called incest, which personally I'd rather call it sexual abuse than incest because of what sometimes comes along with that. But I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to tell you something. Shame grows in a dark place. So shame grows where secrets are. So I don't keep secrets about myself really anymore. And I say really because I'm not sure. Maybe there are secrets that I can't remember, and hopefully they'll come out and I'll be able to talk about them. But I notice that shame grows when it's alone in a dark place, such as your own mind. So as I talk about it, it's not something that I have to carry the weight of anymore. Now, people can think that I should feel ashamed for it, or that I should feel bad, or that it makes me gross, or that it makes me broken or untouchable, or I don't know, all the things that I thought of myself. So people are allowed to think that of me, but other people's thought of me doesn't validate the truth of who I am. Because remember, I told you in some of the other videos that I take my validation from one place, not from many, only from one, and that's from God. So that's why it's easier for me to express some of the things that have happened to me, because it's really only meant to help but it doesn't create shame in me anymore. Anyway, I was sexually abused by a family member, or incest, and this family member has long since passed away. But he did take a very large part of my childhood. This was the first time, speaking of shame, this was the first time that I learned what shame was. I was told that I would embarrass my family if I were to say anything, that he would blame me, that I remember he called me a pervert, and I didn't know what that meant, but the tone of how he said it, I knew that it must mean something bad. So I remember that's when I remember that word came into my vocabulary. And I remember a family member or somebody asking me, well, where did you hear that? And I'm sure I didn't tell where I heard it. That became a heavy word in my life because I thought that that's what I was. I was confused also by what was happening to my body because I was only 6, so I didn't think, I know now that that wasn't what was supposed to happen. So at that age, I was very confused by what was happening. And that's why I was told that I was a pervert and that I would be in trouble if I told anyone about that, because normal little girls don't act like that. So that was a tough one. And at that point, I remember starting to think that it's not the word that I used at the time, but intimacy and vulnerability was bad. And when you learn it at a very young age, it makes it very difficult to do when you're older. And because I was told that I was not supposed to, that I was told that I would be in trouble if I said anything, I became obsessed with it. So I would put my dolls and stuffed animals in really weird positions, and I would put them in bed together a lot and on top of each other and things like that. And I remember another family member telling me, why are you doing that? What is wrong with you? And I remember feeling, oh, okay, well, that validated the fact that something was wrong with me. So, and I was also being told that good girls don't act that way. And that was when I knew that I was bad and that I should be ashamed. I kept the secret from then on, for sure. And I really never talked about it again. Later on in life, I did tell, but I wasn't believed because I think I told you in some of my other videos that unfortunately I was a liar in a lot of ways. So, that was also considered to be a lie. So I just took it on myself, I guess is how you would say that. I tried to stay away from this particular family member, but no one knew, so we visited him frequently. I just tried to stay away from him. And it was probably the first time I also had to start dealing with hate. I hated him, and I started to pray that he would die, and I wished death on him. And every time something bad would happen to him, I would thank God, which is weird now, but he ended up dying on my birthday, and there were so many mixed emotions because nothing was ever discussed or handled. Or he died around my birthday, excuse me. I'm not sure if it was on, but it was right around it. And it was, I just didn't, we didn't know. I just didn't know how to deal with that. And I didn't know There was no closure is the word I'm looking for. There was no closure. We had never discussed it. He never apologized. It was just something that now I had to carry the weight of his bad choice, but I thought that there was something wrong with me, which is why I was chosen. Hate has been I won't say now, but in the past, it was definitely a difficult thing to let go of, because it spiderwebbed its way through my entire being, and added to all the problems that I already had. But we'll talk more about that in the healing part. I did become a person with a split life. I was one person in front of people, but someone totally different alone, which my siblings would sometimes see. I don't know that my parents saw it, but I know that my siblings did, and some very close friends would occasionally see it, or at least one close friend of mine. She saw it, and she actually, we got into a physical altercation because she saw that side of me. Because I dealt with such an extreme rage also. I couldn't think clearly most of the time, and many of my teachers and leaders thought I had a focus issue like ADD or ADHD, or, they thought they couldn't figure out why I could not stay focused. But my mind was always deep in dark thoughts. It was like a cloud, and I couldn't see through it, and I was always afraid and always filled with anxiety, always on the edge of tears or hysterical laughter, very jumpy, stressed, afraid to be alone with anyone, but at the same time, drawn to sexuality, even though that was not something I was actually doing as a teenager. So I became like split. I was really religious about it, but secretly desired it. So, and now I understand more, which we will talk about more later. I also tried to hurt myself on many occasions in many different ways, like burning, cutting, hitting myself, like trying to, like when I would skate or do any type of those, even entertaining, I would try to fall and hurt myself. It was a very weird time. Because I didn't want to feel internally as horrible as I did. And I noticed that pain on the outside detracted from that, even though it didn't help. It just was a different kind of pain. And unfortunately, it didn't work. So I became, if possible, more ashamed and broken. And this also carried on into my adult life. As a teenager and on into my early 20s, I began to make very dangerous sexual decisions. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but I will tell you that it put me in some very precarious situations. And it's a blessing today that I don't have more physical problems than I do. So I'll talk about that too, because it's just a miracle. It's a miracle. I also had no drive to make anything of my life. Goals, I had no idea how to even think in those terms. I didn't care about, I went to college, but I didn't care about it because my mind was always elsewhere and unfocused on that. And I was still in the place of trying to hurt myself. And, oh gosh, I self-sabotaged so much. I never thought anything good would happen for me, so that tended to be the focus. So even if good things were happening, I really only noticed the bad, and it felt like it perpetuated that. And because I really had no drive in my life, I found that my goal, now looking back, I can see that my goal was to actually die, which is terribly sad, and I know that it is. But I know now that that was probably my drive. I only understand this now. Back then, I thought I was just partying and having fun like everyone else, but not many healthy people surrounded me. I remember having talks with many of the people I hung out with, and I think every single one of them had a story of sexual abuse, and that just made me think that it was normal. Like, and we would compare, like, okay, well, mine's not as bad as yours, so we would compare like that. And the really bizarre thing about it was we never thought that there was a way to get help from it. We just kept ending up in the same place. So it was a cycle. We all thought it was a normal thing, and that other people just lied about the fact that it didn't happen to them. And we thought that, and I say we because we actually had discussions about this, we thought that people who were healthy were the blessed ones, or the ones who deserved to be here. And that was another area that we hated people. We really hated people that were healthy, because it was really hard to rationalize and figure out why they could have that and we couldn't. And so I thought it was just something that happened, and I needed to just get over it. As many of you already know, if you have listened to any of the other videos, I got married trying to fix things. And as you also already know, that did not work. It affected my relationship with my husband in ways such as I cried every single time we had sex. I felt dirty and wrong every single time. It is a miracle that we made it through those first few years of our marriage. For sure. As a parent, I wouldn't let my children leave my sight under any circumstances. And now they say I was strict. And to me, it didn't feel like I was being strict. It felt like I was being protective. But I actually instilled a few things in them that they still have to deal with, as far as like anxiety and a little bit of fear and things like that. They weren't allowed to go to friends' house until they were like 13 years old. And I knew the parents, but that even then didn't even really happen that often. I usually said kids had to come to my house. I didn't even let them spend time with family members for obvious reasons, because of what had happened to me. I didn't trust family even. And I say even, but probably mostly. No one could be trusted in my world. I sadly instilled a lot of this, like I said, of this anxiety into my children that to this day they are working through. I also struggled with an addiction to porn for many years. It seemed even more wrong for me because I'm a girl, and I thought girls didn't do that. And everybody, everybody would say that girls didn't look at porn. It was just men. So I thought, even more so, I thought something was wrong with me. But, over the years, I've learned a few things. Like, as far as porn addiction goes, 1 out of every 3 people who look at porn or are addicted to porn are women. This private struggle, because it was private, I did not talk about it or tell anybody, continued on into my early 30s. Until I had had enough and believed that I could be healed, which is where I'm going to stop. In the next video or 2, I will talk about, and I say video or 2 because it probably is going to take a couple more. I'm going to talk about things to look for, my relationship as far as God is concerned concerning this, and how I came to healing. I do want to hear about y'all's stories. And I know you don't have to share it publicly on Facebook or Instagram or any social media. You can DM, PM me, or email me, or call me, or text me, or anything. I would love to hear your story and help you find healing if you haven't already. And if you have, I'd love to hear that. I love to hear when people are healed. And if you have been keeping this a secret, it's time to let someone know. It's time to let the cat out of the bag, as they say. It's time to get free. I will continue to be open and honest as possible to share in this process of healing. Thank you for listening and helping me and others pay it forward. Thank you.